Welcome back once more to Long Live the Kaiser. This is the final episode in this series. Originally, I promised to make this a 5-part series, but there is not really much else to talk about. This episode will cover how Spain or China could win the Cold War in this universe, and why they didn't in the main timeline. With all of that out of the way, let's jump into the finale of First, I'll cover Spain. The way I see things, Spain was the least likely to win the Cold War, despite their nuclear advantage. For those of you who don't recall, in the second episode 1 talked about how a vast majority of the world's uranium deposits lay in CMS territory. Although this would at first allow for the CMS to have a nuclear monopoly, I believe that this would allow for something to happen that didn't happen in the main WIXO timeline. The development of hydrogen bombs. In the main WIXO timeline, the uranium deposits were quite evenly split between Chinese, Old Empyrean, Russian and neutral nations. But with the CMS in such a good position, I think it is super likely that the Dutch and Chintz would look for alternatives to uranium, eventually developing the hydrogen bomb. I believe that the Dutch would develop it first, seeing as how corporatist China would most likely sabotage itself with the companies infighting. But with that, let's start with the first change to the timeline. The Cold War started over the split of the triangular powers, fueled by the question of decolonization. Many have pointed out that the Dutch Empire wouldn't decolonize at all, so this is unrealistic. I disagree. The Dutch Empire was very liberal-minded and liked the idea of democracy, proof of which you can find in episode 25, during World War I. As World War II was in this universe basically the same as World War I, but more intense, it's basically inevitable that the same pro-democracy and pro-people sentiment as from World War I would play up again. And with their victory, their way of life would be proven to be correct. So, when West Africa decolonizes, and nations like Finland, Brazil, and to an extent the AU call for decolonization in the newly established Mondial League, I do see the Dutch Empire complying but keeping some important territories. So in short, the Dutch are definitely choosing to side with the decolonization movement and will definitely form the BTO. What I can change, however, is what other members are in the BTO. When the alliance split, I believe that 2 countries could have gone either way. These 2 being Italy and Slovenia. Italy was a colonial power and had been in the triangular powers for a long time. 2 also had strong ties to the Netherlands. Similarly, Slovenia had good relations with both Spain and the Netherlands. To give Spain a better shot at winning the Cold War, I will allow Slovenia to stay with the triangular powers and eventually with the coalition of Mediterranean states. With Slovenia in the CMS, I see no reason for Greece to join the BTO. So they could either remain in the CMS, or more likely, they stay neutral. Then, we reach our first proxy war, the Spanish-Ukrainian War. Spain won this war in the main timeline, so I will change nothing about this. Although Greek involvement has been butterflied away. The second war were the Colombian Wars. This war was quite difficult for the CMS to win, as when the Caribbean falls, they have very limited access to Colombia. And as luck would have it, the Caribbean was one of the most rebellious areas of Colombia. Combine this with proximity to North America, and the Caribbean is never holding. We can, however, reduce the Caribbean quite a bit. Cuba, Hispaniola, and Jamaica are near impossible to hold. But if Puerto Rico can stay under Spanish authority, then Spain retains a strong outpost to maintain control of the Caribbean Sea. Similarly, if Central America can be kept at bay and not reach as far down as they did, the Caribbean stays Spanish. With the Caribbean secured, the CMS can more effectively keep control over the situation in South America. At most, the southern insurrections can be forced across the border into Hibernian South America, Brazil, or Chile. At minimum, the insurrections stay in the Amazonian jungles without any real way of opposing Colombia. Colombia is saved. then Canada has even less of a chance of gaining independence than in the main timeline. The main reason why I had France win the war in the main timeline was to 1. Not have it become obvious who would win the Cold War, and 2. Because I genuinely think France was favored to win. If I was in charge of the French forces in Canada, I would make a network of roads and railways between the various military installations, utilizing blockhouses, similar to the Second Boer War IRL, to prevent rebels from escaping their encirclement. I would eliminate each pocket one by one. Relocate the entire population to one region to cut off the rebels from their vital civilian support. After the rebels have been dealt with, strategically relocate the population to be in cities far away from each other to minimize collaboration with whatever rebel insurrection might remain. I would keep the coastal cities intact, though, for its strategic importance as the gateway from Europe to Canada. Destroying them would only hinder France themselves. North America can send whatever they want across the border, but 95% of what they send will never make it to any population center or militarily strategic point. This is how I believe France would have dealt with the situation. I will have the same exact thing play out in this double alternate timeline. France manages to crush the rebel pockets one by one, whilst cutting them off from the populace. With that, the CMS retains the Americas, shattering the BTO illusion of safety in the Western Hemisphere. In fact, the CMS could even try doing the same trick on North America and Alaska, although I doubt that this would be very successful. A part of the Cold War I didn't talk about in Episode 2 was the diplomatic battle over the former old empire. China, Spain, and the Netherlands would battle to spread their ideologies to these nations. Spain was most successful in the Red Sea countries, Mesopotamia, and in Anatolia. The Netherlands was very successful in Socotra and northern Arabia, whilst China managed to get Arabia and India in their sphere. In this universe, I could see Spain being a lot more successful if they had more luck on their side. This could come in handy during the Gulf War, as more nations can join India's side in the conflict, potentially leading to them winning the conflict. In this position, the CMS has influence from Ecuador to Bhutan, and are set to win the Cold War. China would get more desperate for uranium, so both the Kazakhstan and Congo wars can become even larger disasters for China. And let's say that there is never a standoff in the Canary Islands, so West Africa falls. At this point, China may already collapse. This can happen if the CMS destabilize Chinese Australia and the Philippines. Should these enter rebellion, it is likely that the Chinese mainland will follow. As the Chinese government implodes, the Cold War is not only between the BTO and the CMS. There are not many ways that the BTO could fall, even when losing nearly every proxy conflict in the Cold War. But I believe that the most reliable way to do it comes in the form of England. England has always been a weak and unstable nation. In LLDK, I had Spain launch a coup there when the BTO was busy in Norway. I will still have this happen here, but I will have the CMS giving way more supplies and weapons to England so that when the BTO invades, they have a much harder time. Realistically, the Dutch would still win. But if England is lucky enough, they manage to resist the invaders for long enough to have the war seem pointless. The first to fall would be the eastern members of Poland and Finland, as they have nothing to gain from this war anyways. If the Netherlands doubles down on the war, their government may become so unpopular that it ceases to function. Again, this is not very likely, but it's the best way I can think of to have Spain win the Cold War. Without a government, and with their allies currently not willing to assist in any wars, Loire could break away and seek protection from France. After that, some other regions, specifically Eastern territories, could break free. Without a way to respond, the Netherlands has to recognize these regions leaving the empire. As the BTO argues amongst themselves, the alliance disbands, Russia reunifies under the South, and the Spanish Empire with a coalition of Mediterranean states stand victorious in the Cold War. Now for China. China joined the Cold War later than Spain or the Netherlands, so all of the earlier conflicts we can ignore as they have no impact on China. The only important things from this is the collapse of Colombia, which happened in the main timeline as well, and Slovenia joining the CMS. The first conflict of relevance to China is the ideological battle for the old empire. If more states join the Chinese sphere, the Chinese companies could exploit the resources of the area, particularly that sweet oil. And with China owning most of the Middle East, Pasindea stands even less of a chance. With the Middle East under Chinese ownership, China has the perfect opportunity to project influence over Central Asia, gaining even more resources for their companies. But perhaps most importantly, if China wins the Congo War, then they have a strong foothold in Africa, directly able to contest the CMS. As the region becomes economically dependent on China, they are set to rule the new world order. Remember how earlier I mentioned Slovenia joining the CMS is good for China? This is because it allows the Dutch economic sphere to be substantially smaller, and although the Spanish one is expanded, that doesn't really matter. We could even have North Russia be excluded from economic cooperation if Finland and Poland are annoying enough. Spain's collapse happened because of issues in their monarchy, not their economy, so even if their economy is good, their monarchy will cause their downfall. I will have Spain die in the same way as in the original timeline, but with one difference. The new nations turn to the gigantic Chinese economy instead of the free world. China controls nearly every major industry, nearly every resource, nearly all corporations. To put it simply, the Dutch can challenge the Chinese militarily, but cannot even hope to challenge them diplomatically or economically. The Dutch Empire fades into the background of world politics, as they too inevitably succumb to the unfathomable economy of China. This was the end of Long Live the Kaiser. This mega scenario was the largest I ever did, and I am glad I finished it. I really enjoyed making it. Sadly, this was likely the last Wixo scenario I will ever do. And I know that might sound as a surprise to many, but I have been trying to leave Wixo behind in favor of other content. I will release a video soon where I talk about the future of the channel. After that, Carcass of the Empire will be back on schedule. But for now, this was the end of the video.